The second panel today is going to be talking about the subject of farm labor. Hello? You want to talk, go outside, please. Thank you. Second panel today is going to be talking about the subject of farm labor. A recent article in the Wall Street Journal quoted a California grower who said, "Labor is the #1 issue in agriculture. It's not pesticides, water supply, or land use. Without farmers, we're out of business." Now, we all know that mechanization has taken place in many of the crop areas, but we also have heard that machines can't determine when a strawberry or a blueberry is ripe, and labor is absolutely essential. Many native-born North Carolinians haven't been willing to work in the outside environment. Now, let me say to you that there's going to be a very important press conference tomorrow at 11 o'clock in front of our General Assembly, and I would encourage each and every one of you to be there, because there's going to be an important announcement about a statewide survey that has been taken concerning labor and agriculture. So be there to hear all about this. We want to devote the next few minutes to a discussion about labor, and we've assembled a very good panel to participate in this. Representative Harry Warren, you will notice from your bulletin, was supposed to be here with us today, but he has been conflicted in the legislature and unable to attend. We've also got Nolo Martinez, who's the president of Nolo Consulting, an adjunct professor. Father Paul Bryant, who is here from Wilson County. Bob Cotham, an Iredell County furniture manufacturer. Peter Daniel, the assistant to the president of the North Carolina Farm Bureau. And Jake Parker, who is the legislative counsel for the North Carolina Farm Bureau. All right. As we did in the previous panel, we're going to ask each of these panelists, I think I'm going to cut it down to 1 minute, because the 2-minute discussions lasted about 10, so maybe if we cut it down to a 1-minute introduction, we'll get about 5. What do you think? We're going to ask each person to make a brief statement, and then we're going to get into our discussions. And Jake, I'm going to start with you since you're over on my left.
Wonderful. Can everybody hear me? I am Jake Parker, used to be National Legislative Director, Legislative Counsel. My focus on this panel is apparently to talk about state-level immigration issues. As you all know, last year the General Assembly enacted what we call H-36 or House Bill 36, which would make mandatory E-Verify, the voluntary federal verification program, mandatory for certain North Carolina businesses. And that has a big impact on agriculture, or would have a big impact on agriculture in North Carolina. We are working on some efforts to maybe fix some parts of that bill, and I'll go into more detail on that as we go.
All right. Nolo Martinez, talk to us about what you see in this area.
Thank you. I've been in North Carolina 27 years because of Jim Graham, and I stayed because of NC State. I was working with farm workers with disability. I think that we all will agree that across the U.S. we do not have enough legal farm workers to support agriculture. If you look at the population of North Carolina, or any state for that matter, it doesn't look necessarily like a pyramid. When you have a pyramid of the population, that means that the base would actually replace those that are working. We look more like a Pepsi liter, like a bottle. That means that we're not going to have enough people to replace that top. If we don't look at immigration as an issue to solve the problems in agriculture, there is really a problem by saying that you're going to solve immigration at the state level. We have to look at programs that are comprehensive, like ag jobs, and look at whether or not we can replace 77,000 workers, which actually worked last year in agriculture, to support North Carolina agriculture with some better means of comprehensive immigration reform. We'll talk about that later.
Thank you, Nolo. We're talking primarily about ag labor, but Bob Cotham, you run a furniture manufacturing business in Iredell County. you've got a perspective on this too.
Well, Tom, we're not in Iredell County, but we are in Randolph.
It says here you're in Ireland.
Well,
It's in High Point.
we're in Davidson, Randolph, Guilford, and Forsyth. I work for United Furniture Industries. We are the largest seating manufacturer domestically in the United States. Today we have about 1,100 people in North Carolina if everybody came to work today. We have some 3,000 nationally. This week, if it all hits on 8 cylinders, we'll make something north of 60,000 sofas and chairs this week in the United States. We do have labor issues. We compete with the Chinese, the Vietnamese, and domestically. We have productivity issues. We have to maintain and increase productivity. I'm not a farmer. I'm here because we have issues with immigration reform, and I'm here because we've been working with the Farm Bureau and other related industries here in North Carolina to seek a better way to employ essential labor.
Thank you. Father Paul Bryant is from Wilson County. Tell us your perspective on this labor issue.
I work with mainly with the immigrant labor force that's already here, who are having their children here, educating their children in the public schools. I pick up a lot of pieces when families are hit by deportation orders and run into problems. We're trying to qualify as many as we can of our young people for the, they call it DACA. It's a Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Maybe you've heard about it. It's popularly called the Obama Dream Act. I am a native of North Carolina in Wake County. I've worked for the last 20 years on the down east in different counties, and Nolo and I served together on Governor Hunt's Hispanic Advisory Council many years ago.
Peter Daniels, assistant to the president of the North Carolina Farm Bureau. Peter, your perspective.
Well, I'm sitting up here to really bring the perspective of Washington and what is going on in Congress and the administration in addressing the status of workers that the farming community desperately needs to remain prosperous and to expand operations. In the earlier panel, Larry Wooten said that the second most important issue to the future profitability and expansion of agriculture is the availability of labor and a workforce that's ready to go to work. And I'm bringing that perspective to the panel today.
Very good. Let me start in sort of generalities, and then I really want to get into where the immigration reform legislation in our own legislature, as well as in the Congress, is right now, because there have been some recent developments about it. But I want to start off with sort of a general question. I figured I'd take it easy on you guys to start off with, and we'll get harder later on. All right. Here's the question I want to ask you, because I'm having problems with this. We got the 5th highest unemployment rate of any state in the United States, and yet agriculture has a labor shortage. What's wrong with this picture, Peter?
What's wrong with the picture is we raise our children, as was said in the previous panel, to go to community college and university and not go back to the field to harvest strawberries, dig potatoes, and harvest apples. We send them back to the farm to run the businesses that the unskilled labor provides the raw product for. And we do not have a ready workforce that's in physical condition, that is inclined to work in seasonal style, grueling labor work. We don't have it anymore.
What's this labor shortage costing farmers, Nolo?
Wow. Well, I think it's costing so much that if you look at what happened between 2007, 2008, we actually lost about $1.56 million acres of farmland. So the truth is that what we see today in terms of labor, as it relates to labor in agriculture, is less than 2% of U.S. workers are engaged in that labor. The other thing that I'll say is that the labor force that we use in agriculture has also changed from 7% unauthorized in '87 to about 75% unauthorized now. And I would also say that every farmer that I talk to, and I'm actually including my dad, who is a farmer in the island of Puerto Rico, he was the Secretary of Agriculture, he will say, the Mexican workers are good. They're very good at what they do. And the truth is that at this point, if we are going to provide more income and opportunities for profits in agriculture to farmers, we have to get serious about not patchwork, but look at what we need to do in immigration to solve the problem.
I think that if you were to ask the general public, why won't native-born Americans go out in the fields and pick, or go to the factory and produce furniture in High Point, North Carolina, then I think they'd say it's because the wages aren't high enough. I was frankly surprised. The average daily hourly rate for someone picking crops is $10.76. That beats the heck out of minimum wage. Again, I asked the question.
I have an example.
What's wrong with this picture?
I have an example. In Ahoskie, North Carolina, there's a fast food restaurant that's advertising for workers at $7.25 an hour. And we have people that choose to work at McDonald's or Wendy's or Hardee's. It's an air conditioning. It's set hours. And forego almost $4 an hour in wages, working on the farm, in the heat, in the cold, in the rain, in the dust.
Jake, in North Carolina, we've just, the last week or so, you may have noticed in the news, we've changed the unemployment insurance laws in our state so that unemployed workers are not going to receive as much in benefits or as long in benefits. What is this reduction in unemployment insurance likely to do so far as the labor shortage is concerned in ag and manufacturing and some of these jobs?
I would hope that it would help the situation, but I think the truthful answer to all that is probably not much. I think based on what Peter's indicated, and I know a little bit about Bob's situation in his business, folks just don't want to do that kind of work. They would much rather, as Peter said, be indoors and not have to deal with the elements and the physical nature of the work.
Paul, one of the things that Larry Wooten impressed on me some years back is if we don't import our labor, we're going to import our food. That doesn't sound like a very good choice to me, does it you?
Not to me, especially since we could import the labor and not have to import our food.
Yeah. Well, so what's wrong? I mean, there is a mindset out there. You work in the community. There's a mindset about these illegal immigrants, which I think many people would prefer to call undocumented. This is actually kind of a form of racism again, is it not?
It could be, although the people that I work with don't feel that. They don't feel much racism. What they want is an opportunity to feed their families. Many of them have brought their families here, which of course has added to the problem of undocumented immigrants. And I think the solution I see is to make it easy for them to get here and take the jobs that are available and go back home when they've finished doing the work. And for some reason or another, the Congress is not willing to pick that piece up.
They have steadfastly seemed to refuse to do so. Bob, is this the same type of thing you're seeing in the furniture business?
Absolutely. Our wage scale is a little higher. We were $13.42 in the fourth quarter of this year. But we have run job fairs here in North Carolina. When we opened up our Lexington, North Carolina operation through Davidson Works, we advertised. We had over 900 people show up for jobs. They were older than I am, in many cases almost 60, unwilling to work. And we have very modern, nice operations, but it's a very fast, high productivity assembly line process, and you've got to be able to do it. It's the same thing as working, you know, hard in the fields. As far as Congress goes, there is and really even in this room and to a certain extent down the street here, there's not the recognition that that labor's not there to do what Jesse Helms used to call work. And that's hard work, but it's good work. And we are the most productive furniture company in the United States, maybe in the world. But if we don't have that core of semi-skilled people in that production line, moving furniture and making furniture fast in a high quality manner, we can't make money and we can't create jobs.
I think most people would agree this issue of immigration is one that should be, you alluded to it, Paul, should have been solved by the federal government. It's a federal issue, it's a national issue, and it ought to be solved by the central government to apply equally and evenly to all the states in the United States. It hasn't happened, and as a result, what has happened is that we've seen states like Arizona, Georgia, Alabama pass their own immigration bills, and in a lot of cases, Nolo, these have been kind of mean-spirited, kind of targeted bills, have they not?
Yeah, and there are also some inconsistencies with the federal government. I mean, I think because they didn't act, states have actually taken on some of these issues that we talk as if they are immigration issues, but they are really very much at the bottom. I also would say that even our president, in terms of the Hispanic community, is not necessarily doing quite well on this issue. We have had the highest deportations under this administration than any other president, including the 8 years of President Bush. So I think it's not necessarily one-sided. And the problem that I have with that is that you're going to see a lot of employers, in this case farmers, that would have to be dealing with some of these issues of rates and deportations and issues like that, when they would really want to have a legal force that they could pull from to maintain that vital production that they really want to.
But I want to take issue with you with one
Please.
thing. You say it's not a political issue. 72% of the Hispanic vote went to Barack Obama. You work with these people all the time. What's their rationalization for doing this, Paul? For voting for Obama?
He made an appeal to them, and they voted for him. He said,
I need you as a panelist on my TV show. You give short answers. They're pithy answers. They're short answers.
Yeah,
I
good
like
short
that.
answer.
There was a
Anybody
shorter
else got
answer, that was DACA. The shorter answer was DACA. 6 months before the election, he created the Defer Act for students to actually be able to not be dealing with deportation. So that meant a lot to parents.
All right, I want to get into the next few minutes. Let's see if we can, without putting everybody to sleep. You've had some potato chips and something to drink, so maybe you can stay awake in the next few minutes. Peter, I want to get into this discussion about what's going on in the Congress. We heard right after the first of the year there was a bipartisan get-together, Senate Republicans and Democrats, even House members for that matter, saying that they were going to pass an immigration bill in the United States, and it was going to include two prongs. Number one was protecting our borders better, and second, giving a pathway to citizenship. And that was right after the first of the year, and here we are in March, and what's happening?
Well, this is a classic example of elections matter. And part of the reason Obama was reelected is because of the swing Latino vote. And the Republican leadership has recognized that there's a big deficiency and big disconnect between the Latino population, which really, truth be known, embraces the ideals of the Republican Party much more than the ideals of the Democratic Party. So, but part of the issue the Republican Party faces is its split base. There's the business community that needs the workers, including the farm. Then there is another very vocal part of their base which believes in law and the rule of law and the need for our nation to enforce those laws if we are to preserve our nature and our culture for the long term. And both are very valid, and they've been at odds with each other for some time now. And the Republican Party recognizes that they need to come to some consensus within their own ranks on this issue of a guest worker program, and also consensus on what we do with the 12 million people that are here. And they're beginning to those discussions internally. But here we are, we're in Congress. The President in the State of the Union said, "Bring me a bill and I will sign it," which I thought was extraordinary to say, just bring me a bill and I'll sign it and without any conditions. I'm sure the conditions will be coming. But we have the Senate that I've been part of a task force with the American Farm Bureau developing a framework, which actually the framework started in our boardroom at North Carolina Farm Bureau. It's very market-based, market-oriented guest worker program, and it also deals with the guest workers that are here in this country presently. And this has been well received nationwide among agricultural organizations, and there is a broad consensus developing around the concept that we developed through American Farm Bureau. Take that with the Senate. We've been working with Senate leadership for well over a year now in crafting this proposal. They're there. We're working right
Wait a minute,
now.
what do you mean they're there?
They're there on solving this problem.
Okay.
In the Senate.
In the Senate. And there are ongoing discussions, and this is where the rub is right now. There are ongoing discussions with the United Farm Workers. We've been encouraged to develop consensus with that group and bring them a consensus package which they will incorporate in a comprehensive program. So all that's underway with your staff at American Farm Bureau and staffs of other agricultural organizations housed in Washington. So those negotiations and talks are ongoing right now. But the big surprise is in the House. There's been a gang of 6 to 8 Republicans and Democrats that have been meeting secretly for a couple of years now. And the fact that they could keep this group secret is a major miracle, because Washington holds secrets like a colander holds water. But they recognize this problem, that we have got to fix this immigration system. It's broken. It doesn't work for business. It doesn't keep our borders secure. It doesn't satisfy their base, the Republican Party base, that we're a nation of laws, and if we ignore our laws, we're going down a very slippery slope that none of us want to go down. And so there is a very quiet consensus developing in the House. And I will tell y'all, in the 20 years I've been dealing with this issue, I feel we have the most momentum we've had. We have more momentum today than we had on the previous consensus called Ag Jobs, which is off the table now. What stopped Ag Jobs was 9/11. Bar any any other thing that will defer Congress's attention, we're going to have a good airing of this. But I also share with y'all, if we don't have this ball almost at the goal line by August, September, it will be after the next presidential election.
All right, I hear Peter saying that he's somewhat optimistic about this. I want to go down the line and see if everybody agrees. Nolo, we're going to get an immigration law?
I do. I think that we will get one. I'm afraid that it will be a piecemeal. It's not going to be comprehensive. I think that anything that has to do with increasing military opportunities, increasing students to go into college, I think ag labor will probably be addressed, and the other one will be highly skilled workers because they have the support of Microsoft and other folks. I think in the long run, you're not going to get 11 million folks probably going into that, but others will. I think agricultural workers will be.
Father Paul?
This morning, Lindsey Graham and John McCain met with President Obama to talk about immigration. So that's positive. That makes me optimistic because McCain changed his position completely when he was running for president. Now he's back. Lindsey Graham is side by side with him, and he's facing election next time. So the other thing is, I'm a little more optimistic about Nolo for a reason, a demographic reason. Most of the people who are here illegally have been here for 10 or 20 years. In Wilson County, most of the people who come to church where I preach have been here for 15 years minimum, and they have children born here. And those kids are growing up. And when they get to be 21, they can apply to have their parents come here as legal residents.
Hopefully they can get a driver's license.
Well, that's a state level thing that could happen tomorrow if the people would do it. They did it for the DACA people. They're putting a pink stripe on the license to indicate that they have no legal status. But everybody I know who does not have a driver's license would be very glad to have one of those with a pink stripe on it, because they're paying lots of money to lawyers and lots of money to counties that they live in that they need to put food on the table.
That's okay.
Or pay for medical expenses or things like that. They have to give it to a lawyer and to the court. They can't live without working, and they can't work without driving. So,
Bob, I went to the Emerging Issues Forum here several weeks ago in Raleigh, and the subject of the Emerging Issues Forum was manufacturing. And I'll never forget the president and CEO of Dow Chemical in his keynote address said, you know, there's something screwy going on here when we allow immigrants to come to this land from other countries, go to our universities, get advanced degrees in science, technology, engineering, and math, and then we kick them out of the country and tell them they've got to go back to where they came from so they can compete against us.
Absolutely. But as Nolo said, there really are two tracks here. And that's what we've got to be careful of with whatever federal legislation that we're fortunate enough to get through. It could be piecemeal. I'm cautiously optimistic. We talk to some of the same people that the Farm Bureau people do and to others. Our great concern is when you talk about Lindsey Graham and John McCain, I think the Senate will get a bill out before late spring. The House of Representatives is extremely toxic, and that's the only way to talk about it. And it's a tough environment up there. They're fighting about everything, and they're fighting about everything else. And whether or not you can get a comprehensive immigration bill through the House of Representatives before, as some of our consultants talk about, the silly season which comes around, the electoral season, which is not far from now, remains to be seen. You know, we're working on some things here in North Carolina that hopefully will bridge this issue for both agriculture and industry. We are talking about limited driving privileges and things like this. But you know, this is tough, and you know, there are two tracks. There's a labor issue for semi-skilled, and then there's the highly educated, the engineers and the computer scientists and all that. It's really one bag of tricks, but I believe the Obama administration looks at it as two tracks, at least at this point.
Peter, I like your discussion along the lines of having to have the labor to do the jobs, and it's not just in ag. I mean, if you stop and think about it, if you go talk to the construction industry, they're teaching their foremen how to speak Spanish because most of their workers now are Hispanic. If you go to the landscaping business and other businesses along these lines, they're becoming a larger and larger percentage of the workforce. So there is this need for business to be able to have the labor that it takes to produce and, as you say, profitably be able to make a living. But the other side of this is the rule of law, and this becomes a very emotional tug of war on both sides of this discussion. And it's I mean, I think most of us can probably look at it and say, yeah, we understand the emotional tug of war that goes on here. Is there anything that can take the emotion out of this issue? Or is this going to be what ends up being the decisive factor?
Look at the figures.
Well, I look at the figures in North Carolina.
Pay attention to the economy, not to the emotions.
Well,
that's what's going to do it.
That's what you
argument.
say,
Yeah.
but the truth of the matter is, when we hear all the heat and all the steam from the people who are the rule of law people saying these people are taking up space in our classrooms, they're taking the jobs of American workers, they're here illegally, they've broken the law, yada, yada, yada.
We've changed laws before.
I understand that. But this, again, comes down to an emotional issue, does it not?
Well, the economic issue has to trump the emotional issue.
Right.
You say that.
I
You
say that. No, that's a
the
tough
only way.
question,
It doesn't
but
work.
it
The
has
public
to.
opinion polls don't read that way, do they?
Well, the public opinion polls, immigration concerns are way down the chart.
In priority of
In priority of importance. The importance are, let's get the economy rolling, let's make jobs, and let's get our deficit under control. But I submit to this group that as our economy begins to expand again, there are not enough workers here to fill the expanding economy. That is the reason we have guest workers now, is because the expansion of the 90s and the first 10 years of this century, the expansion it just drew people here into this country like a moth to a flame.
Tough.
They did not come to this country just to enjoy the weather. They came to work. They came to better themselves. We needed them. Businesses needed them in order to expand and prosper.
Nolo?
I think that I've been here 27 years. I've lived 53 years, so I'm from North Carolina more than I am from Puerto Rico. My children grew up here. I would be the first one to admit that I certainly would not want to be in an underground type economy. I think everybody should be paying taxes. Everybody should actually be giving back as much as they take in. One of the things that has happened is that, yet it is true, we are a nation of laws. What happened for the last 25 years in North Carolina is that we follow the law of supply and demand. Not so much the law of, now I see you, now I don't, you work in the fields. The one thing that is very true is that second generation of Hispanics have break bread with our children, have become more familiar. There was a discussion before this panel about mainstream rural North Carolina. There's one thing I can guarantee you will find, and that is a Mexican restaurant in every single county in the state of North Carolina. So these folks are hiring folks, they're paying taxes, but what I think we need to do is, without legal immigration reform, we continue to have this underground economy, and then people are going to get really mad and angry, and they should. But until we have Congress acting and the president acting, we're going to continue to have these problems.
Jake, okay, as things now stand, we've got this H-2A program, which allows for hiring immigrants if native-born citizens aren't willing to take a job. People in agriculture don't like it and don't use it. Why is that? Is it more expensive? Has it got more documentation and paperwork? What's the problem with H-2A?
Yes, to all those things you were just saying.
You can become a panelist on NC Spin also, as a matter of fact.
A lot of people in this room use the H-2A program and understand its problems and issues. We need to reform that system. I think Peter's talked about a proposal that's being considered at the federal level that's a little bit more flexible than the H-2A program. But the important thing, I think, with respect to H-2A is it doesn't cover year-round operations. It's also not accessible for somebody like Bob and his business. And we need something that takes into account a more realistic picture of what the ag economy is like. And H-2A just does not do that. We're hopeful that we'll move away from that program by adopting the plan that Peter's talked about.
Well, let me jump in on that. The H-2A program was never designed to work efficiently to bring in workers. It was designed to be a domestic worker protection regulatory system to protect domestic jobs, which no longer exist. Those workers no longer exist. So we're forced to go through bureaucratic hoops, adverse wage rates, through a hostile U.S. Department of Labor that despises this program and doesn't want to see it work well. We have 1.2 million need for guest workers in agriculture in this country. And the U.S. Department of Labor cannot process 60,000 of them that we need.
We can also say one positive thing about H-2A. If you look at the numbers, and I actually not in favor of the program, but I will say that this proves that the farmers want legal workers. Mm-hmm. That we have lost more than 11,000 workers in the last 3 years in North Carolina that are migrant, seasonal, or over 150 days. The only ones that have not lost the same number is H-2A, but stays at the same 10,000. So farmers want to hire legal workers, but H-2A is not going to support 77,000 that are needed. That's just the truth.
Bob, the other thing that we hear so much about in the news today is this E-Verify program, particularly in the manufacturing segment and construction and other segments. E-Verify. How's that working?
Well, for us, we went under the E-Verify program, employing more than 500 people on October 1 of last year. Insofar as Latino labor goes, I have a 100% failure ratio with E-Verify. We have hired other folks.
Well, that's kind of conclusive.
Yeah, it's conclusive. Absolutely. We've hired other folks in. If you want to look at the real cost, and we can calculate the real cost to us, assuming that our production rates continue where they are for the rest of the first quarter, we will have a $1 million excess labor variance this quarter because we can't hire enough people to make enough furniture. We're working people 60 to 62 hours a week. We bring in laborers or whites and blacks, we put them on our production lines, they're gone by 9 o'clock, or they don't come back the next day. I told Governor Perdue this time last year, if we run a 5-panel urine drug screen, I see some of y'all shaking your heads, if I line up 60 of them out there, give them a 5-panel urine drug screen, 40 of them will fail or walk off before we do the test. I see other people shaking their heads. It's tough. It's a societal problem. You know, we listened to Billy Ray Hall talk about infrastructure. They're not the laborers here to build your infrastructure if the construction industry came back today. They're not the brick masons. They're not the guys that'll get in the trenches and lay the sewer lines. We've talked to construction industry. We've talked to the green industry. You know, it's a tough situation. It's a tough sale. It's tough being in industry or being in the you know, agribusiness and coming out of the weeds on this thing. But we don't have a choice.
Well, Jake, I want to bring this thing down to a more local level. We've been talking about what's going on in Washington, and we've been talking about some of those issues. I'm hearing rumors that this General Assembly in North Carolina is talking about passing their own immigration legislation. Tell me what you're hearing and what you think it's going to be like.
There is some discussion about that, Tom, and it goes back to, I think Nolo was talking about the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA. That's kind of been the catalyst. This whole license idea has interested some on the House side at the General Assembly in trying to address that driver's license issue. I think they've heard Bob's comments. I think they've heard our comments about the need to have that driver's license issue addressed, and there may be a window to deal with that issue there. But as you all know, and you've heard me talk about for years, there's always give and take in the legislative process. If you want something, you got to give something. And so there's been some discussion about reopening and looking back at the E-Verify law. We're engaged in that discussion as well, trying to make it a little bit easier for everybody in business to deal with it. And then, but the main thing I think that's going to drive this is a real need by the Sheriff's Association and some of the other law enforcement groups to have some kind of system so that they can identify who's here when they stop somebody on the highway. And so those are some of the ideas that are being talked about. We're still waiting to see what the bill will look like, but we're engaged there. I think most of the interest is in the State House, and when you guys are downtown tomorrow, we really need to talk with our senators about the importance of this issue and why we need to deal with the problems that are in E-Verify, but also give some strong consideration to that driver's license issue from our interest side, but also from a safety side. So it's a tough issue, but we're working on it, and I don't know how.
Peter, I hear the sheriffs, you're talking about the Sheriff's Association. I hear the sheriffs basically saying, hey, look, guys, we just need to know what the rules are. What is it we're supposed to enforce? What are we not supposed to enforce? What passes, what doesn't pass? Who are we supposed to deport? Who are we supposed to leave here? Those kinds of things. Then all this stuff with E-Verify gets wrapped up and involved in this whole issue, and it gets to be a very complicated issue. Let's speak specifically right now. Would the agribusiness community in North Carolina be willing to accept an E-Verify program?
Not blanket, no.
Under what conditions?
There's got to be a way that we can access the workers we need with the flow, not only of those that reside in the state, but the flow that come through the migratory seasons. That is of absolute importance. Right now we have a 90-day exemption from E-Verify for seasonal workers. Well, that's fine as long as you don't have 25 full-time employees. If you have 25 full-time employees, you're required to E-Verify coming next summer, I believe. Okay, well, the federal government has a voluntary E-Verify program. If you go to the federal government and say, I want to E-Verify my employees, you E-Verify every new hire. It does not recognize a seasonal exemption. So we've got farmers that are in a real crunch under the current situation. So whatever, if there is a mandatory E-Verify in North Carolina, and part of the carrot is driver's license availability. If we go down that road as a state, we have got to have a way for these workers to come through and be allowed to work, whether they're here in the state or whether they're coming through the migratory patterns that have lasted for well over a century. And we're in, Paula Page, Jake, and I are in pretty intensive meetings to try to hammer through all this.
All right. As we did with the first panel I want to ask you to get out your crystal ball. Tell me what's going to happen so far as this immigration issue. When is it going to happen, and what's it going to look like? Nolo, I'll start with you.
I will say that I hope that Farm Bureau across the nation becomes as active as you have become. I think that it is, for me, one of the most critical elements of this change. If we're going to change immigration, you have to get the employers right there in front of everyone. If you're not involved, they listen to you. They don't listen to Martinez, unfortunately. They listen to people that have been doing this for a long time, and I think we need you in that effort of immigration reform.
Father Paul, what's going to happen and when?
Ultimately, we'll have immigration reform. I just hope it's before the rural economy
Before Jesus
crashes.
comes again?
Billy Ray, what do you say about that?
All right, when do you,
He's the prophet.
yeah, when do you think it's going to happen?
If it's piecemeal, I think we'll get some pieces this year. I still hope for comprehensive reform, which will deal with all the aspects of the problem.
But you two guys have both talked about piecemeal. Piecemeal doesn't solve the problem, does it?
It depends on who's...
Doesn't this have to sort of be a big-time all or nothing at all kind of thing?
Ideally, yes, but we're dealing with the reality of the U.S. Congress and all those things.
There's not much reality in the U.S. Congress.
My negative side is the same, similar one that they have in the House side. We haven't really seen anything that I feel as comfortable as I feel with the Senate. Comprehensive immigration reform would be the ideal. I don't think that that's coming down. However, I am more positive about perhaps what agricultural labor will probably get, some benefit. Not everybody will, but I feel very hesitant to say that we're going to have something that helps 11 million is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you're talking about the U.S. Congress. Bob Schieffer was down here a year ago, and I interviewed him. He said Washington, D.C. is 26 miles surrounded by reality. What do you think is going to happen, Peter?
Well, if I knew what was going to happen, I'd be a wealthy man. But you know, dealing with Congress, it is a totally unpredictable animal. It is our sincere hope that they're going to solve this and going to solve it by the end of this congressional session. Having said that, we're working. I want y'all to know that the full resources of American Farm Bureau have been unleashed on this, and the group that I serve on nationwide, we're getting constant updates. We are mobilizing in those states as we speak today to impact. We got a list yesterday of senators and representatives that needed to be touched. That is underway today. So I want y'all to know the power of your organization is being unleashed. And if it can be accomplished, it will be accomplished. We're at the point nationally, if they tighten the borders up anymore, and if states continue the state by state action to create a hostile environment for guest workers, they're going to cripple the only bright spot of the economy of this country, and it is something that has got to be solved.
Bob Cotham, what's going to happen? When?
Well, I'm hoping that Congress can solve this problem. I'm betting a lot of money that we solve it in the interim here in North Carolina with a good bill that we push through here. And we've got to bridge this thing. That's where we are.
Yep. Jake?
I think that politics is ultimately a numbers game. I think in the United States House, you've got 218 votes to pass a bill, and there's this thing called the Hastert rule, which is you got to have a majority of the majority party to get a bill up on the floor and passed. And you saw with the fiscal cliff discussion, Speaker Boehner dismissed that. That is, in my view, the way that this gets done in the United States House. And it's a risky move. But I think that there's precedent to do it, but they've got to hear from you all. And if it doesn't happen up there, we're going to work our tails off down here to try to get something to ease the implementation of this E-Verify program.
I thank you all for your your conversation today. Nolo Martinez, Father Paul Bryant, Bob Cotham, Peter Daniel, Jake Parker, and audience, let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you.